Hello and welcome to another episode of the CollabTalk podcast, where we discuss the convergence of technology, business productivity, and collaboration culture. And my guest today is Michael Gannotti, a principal technical specialist at Microsoft, focusing on the healthcare sector, and we'll get into more of what you're doing there. But he's also a longtime productivity, customer experience, and modern work expert. And we're talking today, great topic, AI and the new productivity paradigm. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Christian, and I'm real excited to talk about AI because it's pretty much all I talk about these days.
Well, we're getting into that separation of what, like, from the sales perspective, Microsoft wants to do, and I'm really interested in like the conversations and what customers are saying. I should also point out, folks that don't know Michael's background, he does a lot of great video content out on Instagram, elsewhere, with his home forging skills, which are cool to see. It's kind of like you and Vorosky are like the two makers in the M365 community building that stuff. And I don't know if you still go by this, but I mean, I came to know, I think I met you when I was at Microsoft. So back when I was in building 11 and you were teaching you came in to meet with some of the, like the Rangers and other stuff, some training, something or other going on there. But he used to be known by the moniker of the SharePoint Samurai back in the day. So that's right. I know. There you go.
There we are.
He'd walk around with the gi and the sword, and this is like how he got past security. I don't know for some of those, but
I did get approached by Microsoft security once. Came running out. It was fun.
I bet. I was thinking of that because the first two SharePoint conferences, I was still an employee there, and so I was in like the hands-on lab and working it. Like Bill Gates, his last keynote, they wouldn't let the employees in because it was too packed with the attendees there and all that. But like an event like that with all the high profile executives might frown on carrying a sword around.
I had them frown on me out in a commons area. They had me doing a commercial for Dynamics. It was Dynamics Week was coming up. They were going to do this stuff and they wanted me. And so, I used to teach EIDO. So I have the whole get up and I was out there talking and swinging the sword and stuff. And all of a sudden, a bunch of security guys come running out. Whoa, stop. Made me pack my sword up.
They never harassed me about my lightsaber. I don't know. So, yeah. Anyway, so way past security to switch over to the modern technology. Michael, I always like to start these episodes with a bit more of a deep dive into your background. Like, talk about like what do you do day to day with Microsoft and dealing with customers?
Yeah, so these days, and my job, changes frequently, year by year. But the last 2 years, my job is to help customers both on the pre-sales end and post, where I work with them around AI, and not just AI, but specifically in the collaboration field, Microsoft 365 Copilot, and then how can that practically help them with their business processes, things they're doing. I do everything from, like I said, the pre-sales, presentations, mock-ups. Internally, I'm in charge of our national group for AI influencers, and we build demos and stuff. And we have a whole cycle around that. And it's all based upon customer requirements that we're seeing and building stuff out around that. And that spans the gamut from, agents in SharePoint to Agent Builder to Copilot Studio, and then resultant ways of accessing all that. But it's really, most of my day is spent talking to customers about what's going on with them and how AI can help them in kind of that day to day, and then showing them.
One of the things I was really hoping for last year out of Microsoft Ignite, because Ignite historically has been more of the admin IT pro conference. You've got Build that's dev centric, the partner conference, which used to be in July, and I hope goes back to being in July, separated from Ignite, and then the IT pro. But one thing that you would get out of Ignite was a heavy focus on real world stories, less marketing, more practical, here's what we did. And I'll say this, and I'm sure you recognize this
Okay.
too, is it's seriously decreased on that. It's been heavier on the marketing, less on the real world stories. Part of it is that it's still been like adoption, still relatively new to
Yeah.
get prepare for that. So I'm hoping like this fall, like it'll be, we're going to see use cases, stories
Mhm.
of people doing very creative uses of Copilot and AI in general across their platforms. But I'd like to,
Yeah.
I know we're going to go through a few different things here, but
Mhm.
as AI is really kind of shifted like that focus over into productivity, um, what's been the conversation like? I'd like to maybe jump right into like where are companies getting stuck, hung up on making a shift to AI?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things, right, that come into play. First and foremost, IT, security, compliance, and a lot of just because there's a lot of information flying out there on the internet, the interwebs, and I hear it all the time. I just had it this morning. I had a conversation with one of the account teams who they said they're shutting down this piece and that because they're scared they heard this, and I was like, well, but that's not how. So there's a lot of education that goes in, and I can tell you, especially for the last year, I have spent a lot of time with our legal group, SELA, because they can speak to it.
Mhm.
Um, Myself, some of our architects, our folks who cover purview and some of the other things, because there's really this layer approach to how you protect corporate data, information, make sure it's not getting out there. And a lot of the conversation, frankly, has been about how do we secure stuff and customers who move to the cloud. I mean, we're both SharePoint people from way back.
Yep.
They threw all that stuff in SharePoint again, and even though you could still search on it, they they meant to do due diligence and they didn't, and now they're like, oh my goodness,
They
you know,
picked up the garbage and they moved the garbage
they moved
over. They
it
didn't do any
with
cleanup at all.
permissions.
Right.
It,
No, I mean, how much is this just delve all over again?
it, it is. It's delve on steroids, and that's what I try to tell people. We talk about, look, the the access to that data hasn't changed. But what they do recognize, and I totally get this, is that it's so much more powerful because if you think about in the past, you could search for something and then you
Yep.
get one of 10 trillion million results. But then it was incumbent on you to go through those, comb through all that. Now you can ask the AI, you can ask Copilot, hey, what about the following? And if you're doing it in a general look, it's looking across your corporate information and data up in 365 by default. And whatever you have permissions to, it could potentially bring that back, even if somebody had copied that and put it in an area where they should not have. So that's been a big part of the conversation. Thankfully, we have tools to help with all that and to, do interim steps and stuff. But that's been a big part.
That,
That's
and I
one
think that and that is just to help expand on that a little bit too. Is that because when you're reaching out for an answer, ideas, or whatever it is from the AI, it's you have to take additional steps. Where if you're seeing data that you know should have been restricted, that you shouldn't be seeing, whatever, if you're even aware
yeah,
of that, that it could be folded into that answer that you get back, that solution. It's additional steps that they go look at the documents, the source material that it drew from to provide that answer. With a
yeah,
search, you've got to look through each one of those, and then you might just identify, oh, this document I should not have access to, and
right.
open up. Like everybody
Or it's
uses the
outdated
right,
and
right,
it's irrelevant information, right?
right.
Yeah. So that's been the one big area has been IT. The other, quite frankly, has been in the business themselves because we're all creatures of habit. We
Yeah,
have ways of doing things. We all suffer from inertia, right? We if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the reality is, with most of my customers, are having to do more with less. And so showing them how they can, handle more of that informational piece. And really, this is focused on the knowledge worker still when we're talking about their activities and
right.
to take a lot of the load off so they can reduce that time that they're spent in those mundane everyday tasks, lower that overhead, free up time to do other things so that they're not working, after hours a bunch or on weekends. That's a huge piece, but that takes education, and it takes a concerted effort to get people what I call over the hump, right? Because we all see it, and I was, hey, I've been doing this for forever, and I'm like one of those, ooh, shiny. I love to adopt new things,
Right.
but we have learned behaviors, and so then we find ourselves doing the same thing, even though we have this new tool, until you've gotten over that hump. And so there's training and kind of that initial ongoing effort. And then once that happens, and I've had this with several of my customers where we've gone in, done a bunch of training, ongoing, keeping it, office hours for them to ask questions on and keep getting them in front of them weekly. And then all of a sudden it's like something clicks and suddenly they're getting all kinds of requests, IT. Hey, I want to be licensed. I want to be licensed. I want to be licensed. And you look at the usage and it's actually really high.
What would you say are some of the misconceptions that organizations have about AI's role in daily work?
Well, number one, when we're talking, again, I'm talking about Microsoft 365 Copilot.
Yep.
It's not replacing anybody. There's that general fear that you're going to get rid of jobs, and
well, companies are, but I mean
they are.
that's why
They're
that's
doing
why I
that
think there
anyways.
is. They're right, and I think that this is. I mean, we've seen this in cycles. We saw this with the
Sure.
push towards the cloud.
Yeah.
And they lay off these people and then realize, oh, those people were doing a whole lot of other things, and we still need to have those core functions.
Yeah.
And bring them back.
Absolutely. But with Copilot, it's not. While we can do things with autonomous agents, and there is capability that we can do with certainly with Copilot Studio to get in there and do that, or if you go into Azure AI Foundry and stuff. But for the most part, most of the things that people are actually finding immediate value on, they're user initiated, right? They're agents that are focused on a particular task. It's using the things within the apps or through chat to initiate and get working. So it serves as an assistant, not a replacement. It just lessens your time to delivery. And I mean, like I post regularly for our public facing blog. I haven't written a blog post in I don't know how long. I tell it what I want. My stuff's usually video, but I tell it what I want for the text components.
Yeah.
It spits it out. I might go and change 2 or 3 things and done.
Yeah. I just did a blog post around Fabian Williams did an extensibility video. He was on with Dr. Maeda's AI Kitchen or whatever the show's called, and did an episode where a couple times I've seen a session he presented at a conference on automating the generation of around code or whatever you're building technical work to automatically generate the blog post, the social media posts that are tailored with an image, the character limits of each of the different profiles, and do all that automatically. So then you can even automate then the publishing, the WordPress of that content after you've reviewed it and okayed it, and then push out to the various channels. And it kind of gets to that question of, do you care if your content is AI generated and then just edited, finalized by human versus wholly written by human? My philosophy is, if it's good content,
who cares?
Who cares?
If it's and I think it really depends, right? The kind of content you're producing. So in technical realm, and certainly in healthcare and life sciences, where it's all about information, it's informationally driven. We're not talking about people stories and warm things to inspire, etc. We're talking about informational things to help people learn, onboard, whatever that case is. It's about the content. It's not about and the information and how valuable it is and what kind of value that you derive from. Where it comes from, who cares?
Right.
Right. As long as it's something you can easily assimilate. And it's getting pretty crazy with all that.
Well, it's one of the things, like if there's something that goes wrong with your car or something electrical or plumbing wise breaks in your house. I mean, my go-to resource right now is well, it's not AI yet, but it's YouTube. But then we're going to start
Yeah.
to see AI generated video content on
Yeah.
there for a lot of these pieces that'll actually walk you through all the steps to go and
Mm-hmm.
fix that problem.
Absolutely. And you're going to see, and we're only going to see more of that as we move forward. I mean,
Well,
if you think about it, we're just still in that nascent, we're just 2 years in, really.
right.
When I say 2 years, that first year, a lot of that would have been considered in the old days, that would have been beta
Yeah.
time, right? But we are really in that nascent piece, but it is rapidly, people who were naysayers early on, and I had customers that, oh, I tried this and it gave me back this crazy result. And now a year later, it's gotten so much better at those tasks. Like, whoa. And it's like, we're still at that nascent piece. It's only going to get better, more powerful, more capable. And you're going to see more and more of our tasks, especially in collaboration, modern work, starting with AI
Yeah.
versus opening up Word or Excel or PowerPoint.
Well, again, I'll go back and use the Delve comparison. I mean, the complaint with Delve, if folks that don't know what we're talking about, the ability. Well, I guess this will help explain it. So Delve launched; it was out there, and people went in, turned it on, looked at it, and be like, "This is junk. I'm not getting anything." It's like you have to use it. It has to learn. You have to
Yep.
teach it. It has to better understand your usage patterns, and then it becomes more useful. And people then still were complaining about it. But what happened is that it became so powerful. Then now when you go and look at any of the productivity suite in Word, PowerPoint,
Mhm.
and you go back and like, file shared with me, or like kind of all that logic, that's all Delve
It
driven.
is.
It
Yeah.
just got merged in. And
Yep.
I think that's where, I think with the phase 2 of Copilot, it was discussed that we're going to see more features that are AI driven, but it's on the
Mhm.
menu versus I have to add in a prompt to drive that.
Correct. And the other thing is, and I just so I like I said, I do trainings. Just did a training with I tag team with one of my colleagues, and our first session we did a whole thing, the art of prompting, right?
Mhm.
So he delivered this whole thing, and it was all the how do you structure your prompts to derive best value and all that. And then at the end, I said, okay, now everything that Daryl said, just toss it out the window because Copilot is now smart enough that just ask it, hey, I know what I want to ask, but I don't know how to tell Copilot, hey, can you help me with my prompt?
Yeah.
And so one of the users, it was real funny. They were like, I always use the meetings and I go in and ask for, summarize the meeting, but I only want this one bit. And I've tried prompting, I've tried adding, and nothing's working. And I said, well, I don't know. Let's ask Copilot. What do you want to do? And so we did it on the fly and asked it on a meeting, and it came back this prompt, and then it furthered. It said, "Well, would you really like to see a summary of this person at this moment in time?" And blah 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 blah. And they were like, "Poof."
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and again, we're just in the beginning, right?
Right.
So its ability to infer what you're talking about is only increasing. Yeah, and
Uh,
it's just getting better and better.
you're right. And I know with you doing like executive briefings and those kinds of
Yeah.
things, do you have any specific use cases or success stories that you tend to highlight to really show Copilot's transformative
Yeah.
potential? Yeah. Like
Yeah,
what?
yeah. So, um, and I'll tell you, I am a big fan. Sometimes I end up at loggerheads with folks about this, um, but I'm a big fan of a lot of what we as IT professionals take for granted um, is really a lot of times where people are at, and so I always like to try to find out first of all what are you trying to do, and one of the things that I had this came to me from a hospital and they have these things called clinician tip sheets.
Mhm.
They are lengthy documents, and it could be about unspecified, something with the heart and blah blah blah, and it'll have it's actually their approved procedures around. Okay, somebody comes in, and if they're coming into the let's say the ER, What are the approved steps that you should be taking? It's the protocols, right? What should you be doing for that diagnosis? Then what should you be doing for the treatment in-house? What is the follow-up treatment? All that. It's lengthy, and there's a lot of them. And surprise, surprise, when the one customer came to me, it was all in SharePoint.
Yeah.
And they couldn't use it. They were like, we've got so much of this, it's unusable. And they were like, how do we? So the very first thing we did is show them how to do just a simple agent in SharePoint, and then put a link to, I ended up making a demo and then doing a video on, because I was like, this is stupid simple. Yeah. And that for them was transformative, first of all, because they could get to the data. But the other issue, but they still had an issue in that it was, because it was a SharePoint site, it was mostly PC dependent. Which a nurse, as we know, or a clinician, they Epic or Cerner, and that's what they're looking at. They are not going into SharePoints and all that. So then we took it and moved it from that to, we did one of the it's the end of the day, agent builder, right? And put it in a Teams, and then just shared it out to that team, because what could they do? They could open up Teams, which they all had on their phone, hit the icon, and then the little, 4 lines, and down drop their agents. And there it was. And then they could get to everything right then and there. And for them, that with the right, we talked to it, it gave the default output of suggested prompts, which is always, it's okay, but you want to get more specific. So we talked to them. That was transformative. And then sure enough, what happens? I talk to them, and then and everybody has the same thing, of different flavor. So to me, that's what I've seen, like immediate transformation, that often as IT professionals, we overlook. We want to jump to, oh, hey, I want to connect to this service, and I want to connect. Oh, and let's transform. Let's make agentic AI and make it autonomous and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, we did one of the customers, we had 17 user groups, all clinicians, over 2 days across 3 hospitals. And when we looked through their most requested things, which they had no idea, they all had licensing. So, not selling anything. And it was all about the basics. How do I get to this information? How do I summarize my previous day and my upcoming stuff? And it was like, okay, here's a power prompt, run it, save it. And by the way, shortly you'll be able to schedule it and have it auto run for you every morning. And and so it really, I keep coming back to, we want to, as IT professionals, jump ahead, but when it comes to real transformation, sometimes it's the simple and ordinary, and we need to listen to them, what they need.
Well, this from like years of like the SharePoint Saturdays, and they're used to, when I started with SharePoint Saturday back in 2009. So it'd been around for just under a year from when it was launched.
The Saturdays, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And but those events, and they were heavy on the dev and IT pro side of things. There was very little end user content. It was mostly a technical crowd, but even they would have questions about kind of the basics and adoption and usage, because they're the ones out there promoting the technology.
Yeah.
Now you go to a lot of these events, and I'd say 50% or more is end user adoption now. And there's different reasons for that in the technology space, is that the maturity of where we are with stuff. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's as technologists, as people that work in the field, we're excited to go talk about whatever the greatest, newest thing is.
Yeah.
But if you go back, and I always tell, like in your company, consulting company, product company, your partners that are doing those things, if you're independent, if you're small, like have a conversation of like, what are the biggest technical, like IT ticket themes, topics? Where is the pain? And do more sessions around where the pains actually are. That's why I love for like our user group here locally. We once or twice a year send out these surveys. Like,
Mhm.
what are you really struggling with? What do you need to hear more about? And it's often stuff we've talked about multiple times.
Sure.
They need more of that or more fundamental basics around
Yeah.
those topics.
No, absolutely. And I think, when we look at, again, with those user groups and talking about, what do people need and what are they looking at? It goes back to that same blocker, right? With the business end, with the users, that a lot of times this can be overwhelming. And you need to start small. Start with stuff that it's tangible, easy, because then they by nature, once they cross that hump, if you get them over it, they'll start going and running and doing all the other stuff. But
Yeah,
getting them over that, and it's like that whole, take baby steps,
right.
because they haven't learned my favorite movie I always talk about. I'm getting dated now. Sometimes when I mention it, people look at me blank uh, when I'm talking to folks. But What About Bob? Remember,
Family favorite movie. Yeah, yeah.
family, right? You put the goldfish on, and he said, everywhere you got, as long as you take baby steps, I don't have to go down the street. I got to get to the door. Then I got
Yeah.
to get down the hall. Then get down. And it's the same thing. And AI, as much as it can do powerful things, and its adoption and its transformation is going to be faster than the stuff we've seen in the past, they still need baby steps.
Yeah.
A
I,
mind change.
one phrase that, in fact, I think I used it like a week ago, but it's like that in my household, when my kids were teenagers, especially, I think they were big
Mhm.
fans of that movie. When he was like, hey, could you hand me that, please? And like, sure. And they go reach for it, and while you're waiting for it to be handed, you do the I need, the Bill Murray line from that. But it's no, but it's looking at how information workers are approaching their daily tasks.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what you're talking about. If you're wondering why, hey, we're just not adopting a new technology, whatever it is,
Mhm.
and it's the old habits, and then baby stepping in. You can't most often you cannot go in and do this widespread transformational change. It's completely different,
Yep.
and people will freak out. There have been, I mean, I think back to the early days of what became known as the BPOS organization, and a couple of those in early clients, it was just a fundamental change away from what
Yeah.
they were doing. And so some of these teams of these clients, like their employees, like en masse, like a bunch of them, like quit. They were like, no, this is like too
Sure.
much, too
Yep.
fast. And I think we've all learned in the last, 15, 20 years, a lot about adoption in general.
Well, and it's got to be so, you take a tech like AI, which is fundamentally disruptive,
Mhm.
right? It is disrupt. There's no if, ands, or buts. It is potentially a very disruptive technology. But what we need to do as at least what I think, as IT professionals, is say, hey, let's help it be evolutionary, not disruptive.
Yeah.
And so that people can ease in and work their way up. And then, like I said, once they get over a certain degree of usage in that hump where it becomes a regular part, then they'll take off, and then you'll get into those very interesting projects and other things. But it's really grounding. And the other thing is too, we want people to get grounded in those basics and that simple part, because as they're looking at changing things, etc. And I just forgot what I was going to say,
Well,
but they have that whole grounding where they need to get started. Oh, because they're building this is the thing I was going to say. Right now we are still nascent. There are big changes on the horizon
oh
coming,
yeah.
right? To all this. And as companies like Microsoft and our competitors and partners, we're all trying to ease that transformation for people. But at the same time, it's big changes. So with that, it's this, helping people to get through that and it not be so disruptive that they just throw it off. Because if they're not building muscle memory now around that, that AI muscle to be able to work with it,
Hmm.
then those companies at some point are going to be, depending on the industry, could be caught in a lurch.
Yeah. Well,
right?
so a lot of it, we used to always talk about like information workers. There are like email centric organizations or teams. There are collaboration centric.
Yeah,
There are specific kind of line of business app like a CRM platform. If you're in sales, you probably live within Dynamics or Salesforce, one of
yep,
these other platforms that are out there. And
yeah,
so integration across those tools becomes so critical. And I know
yeah,
this is an area that Microsoft really focused on. I mean, simple things like if you think of again the Office 365 suite of productivities, Word, Excel,
mhm,
PowerPoint. It used to be that if there was a share button, it was a different drop down with it functioned differently across each of those applications. And so there became this centralized, like certain number of features. If I'm
mhm,
opening a new file, if I'm sharing something, if I'm backing it up, whatever those things are, it has to be consistent across all
yeah,
those things. And so similarly, I mean, Microsoft is really focused on this is what is that AI experience, that Copilot
yes,
experience alike across these different things. Right now, and this is what I was telling people a year ago was to be able to go in and open up a Copilot window within that application. I'm in PowerPoint and I
mhm,
open up, the SharePoint Designer, which is Copilot driven now, or if I could open up a Copilot window in addition to Designer and prompt and do things around that, it's kind of a separate experience.
yeah,
To
and
where now it's
it
integrated.
is evolving. There's things I can't talk about. I just was out in
Sure.
Seattle, and I got to see a bunch. So I'll just say, stay tuned between now and the end of build. There's a lot
Yeah.
coming, but at the same token, uh, we recognize that, right? So our mantra right now is really Copilot. The Copilot is the UI for AI, right?
Yep.
Where we're trying to create a more consistent experience. You see, now we're like saying anybody can use the Copilot chat, right, as that starting point, um, even if they're not licensed for the full.
I
The
think it
whole
was a smart move for Microsoft to expand the freemium model for this
well,
to get people using it.
it just makes sense, right? And we want people using stuff in a secure manner. And, from our standpoint, our differentiator is we've got the graph and all that data, but really providing people the ability to be able to at least get their feet wet in something that IT can look at, run their due diligence around how we handle stuff with enterprise data protection as opposed to going out to somebody just out on the web and shooting your stuff out.
Yeah.
That's all important, but it provides a starting point because then what's the next logical step? Well, if you need to provide a user or a role a specific function of AI above and beyond that, but maybe not the full piece, you can give them an agent
Yeah.
and you can work with them on just they can have that one agent that they access in addition to regular AI activities. They can still upload a file and analyze. So it provides evolutionary steps for people to dip their toe in the water to get used to it. And frankly, not all people like I deal with clinicians all the time. They're not frontline workers, but they kind of are,
Yeah.
right? Because they're not in productivity apps all day. Their managers are, they're not.
Yeah.
And giving people what they need. So yeah, but it's really that consistent experience. We recognize it. We're working towards all that. There are many things, on the horizon, like I said, but um, yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'll be out in Redmond next month, of course, for summit and lots of other events that are starting to pop up. But they're and by the way, are you doing Vegas?
I
Like you're not
no
doing the
for
same conference
him's.
anymore.
No, I just had my manager. He was pinging me. He's like, "Hey, I need a few demos to do. Can you get me set up?" I'm like, dang you. Yeah, no, I'm always the
I'm
bridesmaid.
prepping for that too. I've got 2 sessions there, so I'm like already thinking like when am I gonna have time to put all this together? But I am interested too because you're based out of North Carolina. I'm here in
Yeah.
Utah. I mean, we've both been in the field. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, we've been out of the main office. We're not at a Microsoft working out of day to day, driving into a Microsoft
Yep.
office. In fact, how far are you from your local, from your where you go into, like Microsoft
I'm
Office?
actually not far, maybe 20 minutes. In
Oh,
the last 3 years, if I've been there maybe 3 times, I think it's 2.
is that like a? Is it so? What's there? Because that is that in RTC or where is that?
Yeah, no, yeah. So we have the RTP, the triangle for tech, and so we have presence there from LinkedIn and GitHub.
Okay. But is how would you see? So being out in the field,
Mhm.
and so again going back to like your productivity focused modern
Yeah.
work roots, how is Copilot, I'd say, influencing the broader Microsoft vision for hybrid or flexible work?
Well, I think again, so if you think about the old days, right? So we're old time. I'm really an old timer, but you would if you needed information, you what did you do? You went and got the I mean, there, yeah, you could look for stuff, but what do we do? We're always people focused, right?
Right.
So I can remember getting up and you go look for them down in their cube and hey, can you help me? You show me this, can I do that? And then even when we started to get into more of the hybrid, there was still, hey, pinging people, and a lot of it was geocentric because we're in the same building, or it's a quick drive over, come see me, let's do this or that. I don't have that. I haven't had that luxury in a number of years. And a lot of times that made it much harder because now, yeah, can I find a person on a meeting? But in this virtual thing, we're rack and stack meetings,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But I need the information. I need to know how to do something. I need help with things. So now, whether it's meetings where I have today, I had a bunch of literally, 30-minute overlaps where I join in late, quick ask Copilot, summarize, what have I missed, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not interrupting. Or I just don't even have time to get a hold of somebody. I can still, like, I'll be in a meeting and I'm asking Copilot for stuff that I need because I got a request from another customer.
Yeah.
And I'm doing things multitasking, leveraging that power, and I'm less reliant on having to get somebody's attention.
Right. Yeah. Funny story about that, because again, I've been in tech for, you know, 30 plus
Mhm.
years and worked in the data center world. So like early on, you were talking about like the change binders around the next to each server. I started my career as a technical writer, then business analyst, and
Uh-huh.
project manager. But like my part of my job 30 years ago was updating the commands, the controls, to follow around server management or some of these systems that I help manage. And I'd have to go up, drive an hour to our data center and to
Physically.
swap out pages
Yeah.
in these binders and walk around.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so that was great. No, but going from that to another experience, I was at Hewlett Packard and down in Palo Alto, and this
Mhm.
massive building. It was there where they're very close to where the company was founded down there in the 60s, I think. And I'm trying to find somebody who's not responsive, and we were just starting to introduce collaborative technology. By the way, that org, my understanding is, are all on Microsoft 365 now, so they're hooked into doing all that. Where
Yeah.
we were, this was back in 2003, but
Yeah.
I had so I had a guy I was trying to track down, was not responsive. I found his manager out of Denver, who then referred me to the team lead for the one that this guy worked on, who
Mhm.
was out of San Diego, who then gave me the name of another guy who could also answer those questions. And I've been waiting like a couple of weeks trying to get some data to coordinate with this guy who was on vacation or out sick or whatever, was not
Yeah.
responsive. And the guy that I needed was in the cubicle behind the wall of my cubicle that I was sitting in, this massive field. Like going away from that to where now it's like, put your data, like, it's not about data is knowledge is power, knowledge is power, let me hoard so I have more
Yeah.
power and control. It's put it all out there, build it, make sure it's all updated so that whenever somebody needs it, it's updated. If something changes or somebody says I've got an additional question,
Mhm.
then I'll go in and modify that as the owner of that. But then you're reliant on that sharing, that open model.
Yeah.
that's been a major transformation of the way
Huge.
that teams work.
Yeah. I mean, it's huge because knowledge was capital, right? It was also job security, et cetera. Now it's not about that. In fact, people who hoard are frowned upon. And especially as we get into this AI world, it becomes even more paramount, right? Where if you're hoarding stuff so it's unaccessible, then really what value are you bringing to that larger org? It's how do I bring more value so that others can gain value? And I mean, and we see that like at Microsoft for my, we have our quarterly connects and our year-end evals, and it's all about, one of our big metrics is making others better, and we do that by sharing, working collaboratively, getting stuff out of here and into the hands of others, and
Yeah.
and also, where did you leverage the work of others? That's another metric. That's a metric, right?
Yeah.
How did you leverage others' work to improve your own? And so that's kind of a key principle, and for AI it's core.
You know how helpful it is for those of us that are very heavily involved in the community aspect of the tech world, because those two things of learning things, sharing that out there,
Mhm.
helping people do that, and then also recognizing others for when their content, their help has been utilized is
Yeah,
part of that. You've got to be reciprocal. You have to
absolutely.
recognize people. And I need to do a better job at the second half of that. But
We all
from
do.
yeah, right. It's an ongoing thing. Well, this kind of fits into that. I always like getting into kind of the cultural aspect, but what organizational or cultural shifts are really necessary for AI powered productivity to thrive inside of a company?
So from a cultural shift, number one, we really have to move away. And this, I mean, it is like I said, it's a tough nugget to get over that hump. But from the business standpoint, use the idea that I need to go in and I need to do all the work, right? Because again, if you think about it, let's pretend it's not AI. Pretend Copilot is Jimmy or Nancy or whoever. It's an assistant. What do we do, most of us? Like I've had in summers when I worked as an architect in our technology center, we would have people that be there, and you're kind of like, I got to think of something for you to do instead of actually helping me with my work, right? Because that's a big mind shift. We're used to, I need to write, I need to do these things, pull these things together instead of letting something out. And so Copilot really is that person right here in the computer to be that assistant. And I think there is a big hesitancy for people to because they're really not giving up ownership. It's still their name on things. They still need to make sure it's valid. It's
Right.
just providing drafts and things. But that's a big mind shift, I think, for people because the idea of an assistant for most people is a tough, hurdle to get over. Yeah, I'm a chief executive. I'm C-level, so I'm used to delegating. And yeah, you take care of this part. I'll look it over at the end. I think it's an easier conversation with them when you show them things than it is with just the everyday rank and file.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, obviously, digital literacy, upskilling your skills, constantly learning, that's like a requirement during this era. I mean, if
Eh,
you work in a number of fields, you don't
yeah,
have to be an information worker. You could be at any place where AI is going to touch some aspect of your business. Like you need to learn
which is
about it, know how
everywhere.
it works. Right.
It's going to touch everywhere. That's the thing. And that whole upskilling and changing, like I've had this talk with some of my colleagues, right? They're like, well, how's that going to affect our jobs? And I'm like, look at what you're already doing, right? Like, I don't go and research for customers anymore, a bunch of stuff and spend hours and block out big time. It's like by the end of the meeting, I'm shooting them stuff. But the thing is, and I'll tell them, I'm like, look, the ability for AI to be interactive naturally is rapidly increasing. At some point, yes, me as a technology specialist, I'll probably be retired by then because I'm old. But at some point, really, where is the need for me to do the role as it's framed today, rather than managing an AI who goes out and prepares? I tell the AI, look, I'm meeting with such and such, blah, blah, blah. It goes out, prepares the presentation, gets the collateral, the resources, does all of it. And oh, by the way, I have to multitask during that time. So you present.
Yeah.
And I'm there as just somebody with color commentary and doing other things. I mean, really, if you think about it, we're not that, maybe 2, 3, 5 years, whatever, but it's not like watching a sci-fi movie anymore.
Right.
And our ability to look at and say, what is my role? Am I managing an AI? Am I, versus am I doing the role and it's just helped me with little stuff? That's today. So they're changing. And I think people are going to need to skill. I had my son, I'm in the South, so I'll just say, bless his heart. We had a talk the other day, and he works consulting at a very large IT project management for one of the world's largest financial companies. And we're talking about AI. And then he goes, well, but that's if people adopt, because some people are going to be hesitant. I said, look, it's not that it's going to get rid of jobs, but jobs will change fundamentally. And if people don't get on board and build that muscle memory, like I'm talking about, so that they're transforming, at some point, they don't have a job.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, that's the case. It has nothing to do with the AI. That has to do with just
everything,
changing jobs and business needs and that. Like you have
absolutely
to adapt and grow. It's like not everybody can go work for the government. And even there's roles are adapting and changing, but just
sure. Yeah. I like that.
So again, I'll go back to like when you're out doing like executive briefings and stuff, are there organizations that are doing it the right way now, that the way that they're trying to prepare their workforce for the AI change, the transformation, the integrations?
So I have a number of orgs that I do work with where they're very visionary, forward thinking, and they're very frank with us too, which is beautiful, because while I do pre-sales as well, I don't pay attention to quotas. I'd rather tell me when they're upset, they're going to tell me, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to hold anything back. So, but what they do see is like, look, we understand it's at this point in time, this is where it's at, but we understand if you look forward to the future, if I'm talking, let's say a pharmaceutical, right? So today I can go and make Word and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But what about when my researchers are trying to work on a new formulation for some type of therapy, drug, whatever. And now it can go out and start reasoning and find duplicative data from other past studies, blah, 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 and start assembling that. They understand that path is there, that at one day they're going to be there, and probably sooner rather than later. But what they also understand is there is a period of time that, as in all adoption, you got the hype, you got the crash, the disillusionment, and then the slow uptick, right? But this one's a much quicker uptick. And so they're spending time in investing in their employees, in key ones. They're not rolling it out to everybody all at once, but they're saying, all right, we're going to buy X amount. And now we're going to start to go back into the organization, and we're going to do regular training. We're going to bring in folks to do that. We're going to train our trainers. We're going to start to have weekly sessions. And they start building on that, just like we saw in the early days of intranet and SharePoint and all that, where they started having, SharePoint town halls internally and their own communities and other things. It's the same things that are happening in those orgs. And that's where you see it. Like I have this one company, this is one that I had mentioned earlier about, they were doing trainings and they have office hours. Mm-hmm. And it was the one where I talked about saying, forget everything, just ask it how to prompt.
Yep.
And we're talking with them, and now they're like, holy cow, the requests we're getting, because what they're doing is they work with one group, they get them trained up. And now it's that it's that domino effect, right? So
Right.
now other people are saying, wait a minute, you're doing what? I want that. I want to do that.
Right.
And then the uptick in the adoption becomes much quicker on the subsequent. So the
Well,
companies,
because you're learning more about their things, and especially
yeah,
if you're on the outside coming as a consultant or Microsoft, you learn more about their culture.
yeah,
You modify what you're already teaching, so then it gets adopted even
yeah,
quicker because it's a better fit. Yep.
yeah. And it becomes self-perpetuating. But
Right.
the companies that are doing it right are taking, yes, they're taking a measured approach. They're not just going, hey, let's go on it all now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love that, but I'm sure our senior
Yeah.
management would really love that. But they're taking a measured approach, dotting their I's, crossing their T's around security, compliance, and other things. But then they're actively being proactive, and they are going after larger chunks of the orgs, right?
Yeah.
Versus ones, we're going to get 500 users and we're going to pilot it for the next year. Well, and they probably, and I've seen this time and again where they go off and then nobody trains them, nobody's doing the regular, and then you look at that usage of just the 500, it's way down.
Right.
Versus this org just bought 10,000, 20,000. I have a few that are like that are doing that, and then but they're proactively, and you look at their usage, and
Huge. Yeah.
it's huge, and then they're saying we have to slow people down because everybody's in cost cutting right now, and we want more licenses, right? So they're trying to budget and do the things to catch up with but they're taking the proactive.
It's funny. We kind of started the conversation. We talked a little bit about how, and I think it was a shift in Microsoft's approach with around Copilot was up front. We were talking about trust, security, compliance,
Yeah,
governance of this, ethical use of AI, all up front, kind
yeah,
of leading the conversation. And I like to think it's because of Microsoft doing it the wrong way for so long with these
yeah,
other products. I mean, that's where like my whole entrance into the SharePoint space was so much around the governance side
yeah,
of things. And
yep,
like, why are you not doing fundamental things? People, it's going to bite us in the butt. And they're like, oh no, like sell more licenses. Yeah, like, and so I think that is another issue for organizations is what is that balance,
yeah,
but between driving towards productivity gains, but also governance and ethical usage of the technology. And we have more tools than ever before in the platform
hmm,
for those things. You don't have to go build it or buy a third party for a lot of the core capabilities there. But is that still a struggle where organizations are like, productivity, governance, security, like this side of it and finding a balance, or is it calmed down a bit?
no, it is, and I'll tell you, like early on, some of those conversations were painful because you had the groups who are, we want to lock it all down, but you have other folks in IT high up who are saying, I want it to do this, this, and this. And by the way, why doesn't it provide this back? And when you start explaining, well, I can go out to, to the thing that you're
You can
using
say it
under
out
the
loud
hood,
here. Yeah,
and
but
I
yeah,
can build all that and do this and that. And it was like, okay, and this is why we have guardrails, because we don't want people going in and, uh, you know, getting back content that is going to violate your HR policies. Do that. So we had to put a lot of things in it. Be blunt, they slowed us down sometimes in comparison, right? Because we're putting that into place. But I think that's important, especially for security and compliance, to understand that, because their perception is oftentimes it's the Wild West, right? They've been dealing with the other things that are out there where you can do pretty much anything, right? And we're not going to do that. We do allow that within our Azure piece where you can build, train, and do your own LLMs, and we'll bring those different ones in, and you can do that. But when we're talking about business productivity, collaboration, modern work, we're putting guidelines in so that you know right out the gate with this, we said your BAA agreement, this falls under it. And that's a big deal for security and compliance. I can't tell you the number of conversations I had where when you'd say that and they're like, oh, come on, I'm like, well, here's the language. Now let's get into the architecture and I'll show you how and why.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple more questions for you
Yeah.
on this. I know, again, you can't talk about roadmap stuff. I mean, I'm privy to some
I
stuff too,
wish.
my NDAs, right? I mean, it always happens when we're able to share some of the stuff. People will be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! So much, so fast!" So you get kind of both sides of that. It's not fast enough, and
Yep.
then it's too fast there.
Absolutely.
Are there any other emerging trends that you see, like AI powered productivity, that businesses should pay attention to?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll tell you a good way to get a sense of where we're going and lead with this. Go into Copilot Studio. And we're starting to they're really rudimentary right now. There's the templates, et cetera. But some of the ones that we have talked about, like you mentioned project management. My son's in project management. And I've talked to him about, if you think of all the activities that roles like that do, that there's many aspects that are the gathering of information, consolidating, follow-ups, making sure people are doing this, they're on task, the scheduling a meeting, all those that all is productivity. And that's all fair game for Copilot. And we have talked about and shown, I think we did it, might have been last Ignite. I can't keep it all straight, but we actually, oh no, was that oh, maybe it was. I don't know.
Was it the SharePoint day that?
They're one of the days where they
Yeah.
got on. I think Jeff Teeper was showing all the latest whiz bang wow.
That was like 3 weeks ago, Michael. I know it feels like it was 7 years ago. It
But
was.
when they talk about, no, not the SharePoint day, it was before that. But they
okay.
talked about stuff coming for project management and
yeah.
modules, right?
Yeah.
So as there's baseline AI, and then there is purpose-built AI. Getting to it all through the same UI and framework, one place to go, but then being able, hey, now as a project manager, I can offload much of those tasks to this. I'm managing the AI to do a lot of the things that I do. You still need the person, but now I can handle a greater caseload, workload.
Well, that whole concept of agents calling on agents, like you put in a request,
Yeah.
It may come back and ask some clarifying questions. Like I love when I see that. When I put something in, I thought I was being outlined very specific, and it comes back and asks me, it's like, do you mean this or do you mean this? Are you looking for this or
Yeah.
this? But to also be able to know its own limitations and know, like, hey, I have another agent friend I know
Yep.
can do that other piece. So I will then activate, and part of the response will be, then I'll go out and do this. Like it almost needs to be, there needs to be like a, kind of like in your browser that you look at a page at a website and click a button and see the code over for that and kind of dig through that, almost to see like the workflow of the response that it will go and do, or the response. So it's kind of a like a breadcrumbs and auditability of
Right.
of that request where it pulled those pieces together. But to be able to go and do like create those purpose-built agents to do those specific things. Again, marketing guy, I'll say like, I want, like if it recurs and it runs like every day, if I'm writing every day, it knows to go to my WordPress site, whatever the latest the post is, to create a summary, format it for each of the 6 social platforms, attach an image, or if there's not one available, create an image that's of the theme, whatever, does it, posts it, and it's ready for me to say, okay, push. To do that kind of automation. So maybe writing is done with this agent, the image creation is done with this agent, the publishing out is done by this other agent, which maybe I need to have a subscription to go and do that. But the beauty is, what you can do now is ask Copilot, like, this is what I'm trying to do. Like, what pieces of this can you do for me?
Yeah.
Or what do I need to go do manually here?
Well, to your point, so this was kind of, it just kind of, the light bulb went off. We had a little over a week ago, we did an internal, because I'm attached to our field sales group, right? So people always think, oh, Microsoft's all technical. We really, in the field, a lot of people are not, right? They're sales. And we did a training on agents, purpose-built agents. And we started with showing how to do stuff in agents in SharePoint and how much you could stretch those. we did it with Agent Builder, and we did it with Copilot Studio. And then we initiated a hackathon on their own, and people created agents and submitted them. And actually today I've been reviewing, one of the judges reviewing their submissions, and it is amazing, again, getting over the hump, because we were trying to do that because a lot of our folks were not doing stuff with AI. And when they started to see the possibility to connect other systems and other things and have things, if I do this, then this will automatically kick off this and come around. I watched one video. I was like, holy cow, this guy had working stuff with dynamics. I mean, he had all the different areas covered. It was generating meeting invites and messages and pulling data from the dynamics and all. And I was like, and he was an SSP. He was a solution sales specialist. And I'm like, that was powerful. And he did it all in studio, point and click. And I was like, that's pretty rocking.
Well, my last question, maybe kind of on top of that. So folks that are like that are non-technical and out there, it's I think that I hear the question just as often from deeply technical people is, how do you stay ahead on all of these things? How are you ensuring that you are leveraging all of this new tech effectively? And I always say, from a business standpoint, is like this. I make a statement that said, like, organizations that play with it, pilot it, trial it, that they're in there, their hands are dirty, doesn't mean that you're an expert in it, but you're aware of fundamentally how it works, where it pulls data from, what the limitations are, where I could further limit, kind of all those things. Companies that are doing that, playing with the tech, they will have a distinct competitive advantage over those that don't. It's a change management fundamental. If you're prepared for it, when it happens, you'll move faster than those that are not prepared.
And I'll just throw it again, because I see it again in the orgs that I see things being successful. It's community. They are establishing community that's doing all those things, that are having the hackathons. Like, I'm going to be flying up north in another month to do an all-day hackathon at one of the ones that's doing a great job. And they, because they build in community, and then they're doing the associated activities that really spur that reward people, that connect people to share. I mean, it all comes back to, if you want, the more we work together, the better we do, the faster we adapt, the more we know, right? Nobody in isolation. And AI is no different. And getting people to work together to do all those exploratory things and to share what they're doing, and that's where the magic sauce is. I mean, there is no magic other than getting people to get their feet wet, their hands wet, and do it together so they can help each other and share. I mean, to me, that's the secret sauce.
Well, it's referred to as the social unconscious. It's that, like, the more people they have in there, it's one, you want to have diversity of thought and ideas that are in there, but then you have to have that unity, that cohesion of, like, hey, I'm going to go and do this. Like, the community helps bring that. Like, hey, we're learning about this thing. Like, I can ask questions. I could be an expert on this topic, and then I'll have somebody in an industry in a role that I'm not familiar with that will say, well, this is what we're seeing. It's like, I'd never even thought of that scenario. And have those conversations. And you just only then improve your idea, your content, your solution, whatever you're building.
Yeah. And I mean, my light bulb going off and me doing something and then having it refined. It's old basic principle, right? Of iron on steel.
The refiner's fire. Yes.
Refiner's fire, right? It's that same concept, right? Because now my light bulb caused me to do this, but now coming up to your ideas, it made me rethink and review, which makes my ideas get better and makes me start to think in newer. And I mean, it goes on and on. And I think, to me, community. This isn't AI like the Terminator. This is, let's get these assistants to help us, and let's work together on it.
I think that's actually fantastic advice. It's a great call to action. If you feel like you're just completely lost, like you're being left in the dust around this, go join your local like Microsoft Copilot community, anything around information worker, like our M365, we're heavy into, like we all are, into the AI stuff that's going on. We love it when people show up and be like, I don't know what to do. It's like, all right, we then ask the questions like, what are you trying to do in this space? You should meet this person. We can help you with this. You should read this, go play with this. That's a great place to start.
It's huge. Like I think of our head nurse. So we have nurses and doctors that we have hired, right? And Kathleen is our lead nurse in the healthcare and life sciences group. She has a nurses group, and it is the head nurses from the big hospitals that you hear about for research and all that, your top medical things. They meet every month, and we've had hackathons and all kinds of stuff, because then they're sharing, even though they're in different companies, they're helping each other. And there's that desire. So whether it's in your own company or working with others, we all make each other better. And I've always been a big proponent of that. Get with community, with your folks, and help each other.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate you helping a community person with an episode of a podcast. But take your time and to come out and chat about AI, Copilot, and productivity. I know it's a popular topic, as you know. I'd love to have you back. Like in a year, I think it's going to be very different. So,
yes,
as long as you're not planning on retiring or something before then. But
I still have to pay off my new house.
Okay, there you go. But I mean, seriously, I realize that a year out, that's probably like 7 years in AI time. But so lots really is. Happen. But I mean, seriously, if we get through Build, Partner Conference, Ignite like this season, I think we're going to see dramatic changes in what a lot of this looks like, how it works. We could have this conversation all over again and go back.
You've seen all that with your agreement. Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be so much more, because it is, that again, we had the initial hype, and like with intranets, it took years to get back up. This is everything compressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. What I could do is I could take the transcript from this one. We could talk in a year. I take the transcript. I'm like, AI, what are the differences? Where does Michael contradict himself? Where does he?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I've used that in online debates to some success there. But
nobody I don't mind getting pointed out, because I know I'm wrong half the time.
Well, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for your time.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Go get in communities, people.
You've been listening to the CollabTalk podcast. New episodes are published weekly, and you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and most other podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.